What if your new cat was never rejecting you? What if every quiet step away was only fear, not distance? All he knew was that his new cat was always close enough to see, never close enough to hold. On a cold afternoon in Portland, Ethan Miller stepped into a small pet adoption shop for the most ordinary reason in the world. He was only trying to get out of the rain. Outside, the windows were fogged with weather and traffic lights. Inside, the place smelled faintly of detergent, cardboard, and cat food. There were kittens pressing their paws against the glass, a striped cat asleep in a hammock, and somewhere near the back, a radio playing softly enough to disappear under the sound of the rain. Ethan had not planned to bring anyone home that day. His life, if you could call it a life and not just a routine, had already settled into something quiet and airless. He woke up in the same apartment, made the same coffee, opened the same laptop at the same small table by the window, and let the day pass without ever really touching anyone else's. Lunch was usually a sandwich eaten over email. Evenings were television turned on for the noise, not the story. Some nights he fell asleep on the couch with the lights still on, as if he needed proof that another voice had existed in the room before the day ended. He told himself he was fine with it. Most lonely people do. Then he saw her. She was in the last enclosure at the far end of the shop, small and gray and white, sitting on a folded towel as if she had no interest in competing with the others. She didn't paw at the glass. She didn't meow. She only looked at him with a stillness that felt strangely deliberate, as if she had already learned that asking too loudly changed nothing. Her name, the girl at the counter said, was Mabel. Sweet cat, she added, a little shy, not the clingy type. Ethan gave a tired half-smile and looked back at the enclosure. For a moment, the rain outside seemed farther away. It wasn't love. It wasn't destiny. It was something smaller, maybe sadder than that. It was the simple, aching thought that perhaps another living thing in his apartment might make the silence feel less permanent. So by evening, Mabel was in a second-hand carrier in the passenger seat of his car, and Ethan was driving home through wet streets with the heater humming low between them. The apartment looked almost the same as it always had. Same couch, same dish in the sink, same lamp in the corner casting a tired yellow light across the floorboards. Only now there was a carrier by the coffee table, and inside it, a pair of watchful eyes that made the whole place feel unfamiliar. Ethan opened the carrier door and stepped back. Mabel disappeared under the kitchen counter in less than 2 seconds. He crouched on the floor and called her name once, then again, softer this time. He opened a packet of treats. He slid a small bowl of food a little closer to the shadows. He lay on his side with one arm stretched toward the darkness, like a man trying not to scare away a dream. Nothing. By midnight, the food was untouched. The apartment felt even quieter than before, as if now the silence had somewhere to hide. Ethan left the kitchen light on and went to bed with the uneasy feeling that he had invited a stranger into his home and frightened her before she had even taken her first full breath there. In the morning, the food had gone down a little. The litter box had been used. Mabel was still nowhere in sight. That became the pattern for a while. Evidence first, presence later. He would catch sight of her at the end of the hallway like a gray flicker of smoke. Sometimes she sat on the windowsill and watched the rain slide down the glass as if she belonged to the weather more than the room. Other times she climbed to the top of the refrigerator, then to the highest shelf of the bookcase, balancing there above the apartment like she trusted height more than anything on the ground. Every time Ethan saw her up there, he reached for her and brought her down. He told himself he was helping. He worried she would fall. He worried she would knock something over. He worried the apartment would start looking messy, scratched, lived in by something he couldn't fully control. Mabel never fought him. That was the sad part. She only went still in his hands, then walked away once he put her down, disappearing into another room with a silence that felt more final each time. Ethan tried to do what he thought good pet owners were supposed to do. He bought a soft cat bed and placed it beside his desk. He bought feather toys, a small plush mouse, a bag of expensive treats, even a collar with a tiny bell that sounded cheerful in the store. Mabel hated almost all of it. She never touched the cat bed. She ignored the toys. The bell lasted less than a day before she began shrinking from the sound of her own movement, backing into corners every time the tiny chime betrayed her. Ethan took it off eventually, but not before feeling stupid for thinking sweetness could be purchased in matching colors and soft packaging. The hardest part was not that Mabel was difficult. It was that she was polite. When he reached down to pet her in passing, she only angled her head away. When he placed her on his lap during a movie, she stayed there just long enough to spare his feelings before jumping down. Some mornings, he found her sitting in the hallway outside his bedroom, as if she had been waiting for him. But the moment he stepped closer, she turned and vanished around the corner. It began to wear on him in quiet ways. There was one late evening when Ethan sat at the table with a cardboard box of cold takeout, too tired to heat it, too tired to pretend he was hungry. Mabel was on top of the bookcase again, watching him from above. Ethan laughed once under his breath, the kind of laugh that belongs more to defeat than humor. "I feed you," he said into the empty apartment. "I buy you stuff. I talk to you. What else do you want from me?" Mabel blinked slowly, then looked away toward the window, and in that small, dismissive movement, Ethan felt something he had not wanted to name. Not anger, not even rejection, something closer to recognition. They were both living in the same apartment like people passing each other in a train station. Both quiet, both tired, both there but not arriving. After that, the changes came so gently Ethan could not have said when they began. Maybe it started with the collar, maybe with the shelf by the window. One Saturday morning, he cleared a space on the bookcase and folded one of his oldest hoodies there, the soft navy one he wore on hard days. He stopped lifting Mabel down when she climbed somewhere high. If she wanted the top shelf, the windowsill, the edge of the fridge, he let those places belong to her. He also stopped reaching for her every time she crossed his path. That part felt harder than he expected. He had not realized how often he had been asking for closeness with his hands instead of his patience. So he began to wait. If Mabel was in the kitchen, he let her stay in the kitchen. If she sat near the couch, he sat down first and kept his hands to himself. Sometimes he held out the back of one finger and let the space between them remain open. If she came forward, she came forward. If she didn't, he let the moment pass without turning it into disappointment. In the mornings, he started drinking his coffee on the floor instead of at the table. In the evenings, he shut his laptop at the same hour whenever he could, rinsed the dishes, turned on the lamp in the corner, and let the apartment settle into the same soft rhythm night after night. 6 o'clock meant dinner. 8 o'clock meant quiet. Rain against the windows, warm light on the wood floor, Mabel somewhere above or nearby but no longer gone. And then Ethan began talking to her, not in the exaggerated voice people use for babies or pets, but in the tired, honest voice he might have used with someone who had already agreed to stay. "Rain again," he said one morning while filling the kettle. "I messed up that project," he told her one evening, leaning against the counter. "You want some more wet food, or are we pretending not to care?" The apartment did not answer back, but it no longer felt empty. Mabel didn't change all at once. She was still careful, still private, still very much herself. But little things began to happen. She stopped running the second he entered a room. She stayed on the sofa while he sat on the floor nearby reading. Once, when he offered his hand, she stepped forward and sniffed his knuckles before walking away. It lasted only a second or two, but Ethan remembered it all day, as if some locked door in the apartment had quietly opened and closed again. Winter deepened. The rain turned meaner. The city outside the window blurred into headlights and wet pavement and evenings that arrived too early. One night, Ethan's phone lit up with a message from someone he had once imagined spending his life with. She was getting married. He looked at the screen in the dark for a long moment, then turned it face down on the table. There were no tears. That would have been easier. No dramatic heartbreak, just the old hollow feeling returning to its seat inside him, as if it had never really left. Ethan slid down onto the floor beside the couch, his back against the cushion, his hands resting open by his sides. The apartment was so quiet he could hear the heater click on. Mabel was on her usual place by the window. This time, Ethan didn't call for her. He didn't reach out. He didn't go looking for comfort from something smaller than himself. He just sat there in the dim light, tired in the way only lonely people are tired, with nothing in him left to perform. A long time passed. Then there was the soft sound of paws landing on wood. Mabel had jumped down. She crossed the room slowly, not startled, not hesitant exactly, but careful in the way trust is careful when it is new. She stopped in front of him and lowered her head to sniff the back of his hand. Ethan barely moved. For one suspended second, the whole apartment seemed to hold its breath with him. Then Mabel leaned forward and pressed her head gently against his hand. It was such a small thing, no bigger than a heartbeat, no louder than fabric settling. But after weeks of distance, after all the reaching and misunderstanding and trying too hard, it felt enormous. Mabel turned once, tucked herself down beside his leg and stayed there, not on his lap, not in his arms, just beside him, close enough to share the silence. And somehow, that was what undid him. Not because the moment was dramatic, but because it wasn't. Because nothing in it had been forced. Because for the first time since bringing her home, Ethan understood that Mabel had never been refusing love. She'd only been waiting for a version of it that felt safe. One that did not rush toward her. One that did not decide for her. One that knew how to sit still long enough to be chosen. After that night, Mabel did not transform into a different cat. She still preferred high places. She still disliked being held too long. She still had a life inside herself that Ethan could visit but never own. Yet something between them had changed in a way that made the apartment warmer without making it louder. She began waiting in the hallway when she heard his keys at the door. She took the end of the sofa instead of the other room. Some nights, while Ethan worked late at his laptop, she jumped up beside it and sat there without asking for anything, as if her presence alone were enough of a conversation. And slowly, it was. The apartment no longer felt like a place where Ethan went to wait out his life. It became a place with rhythm, with ritual, with one quiet creature on the windowsill during rainstorms, one mug cooling on the counter in the morning, one lamp glowing in the corner at night, and the soft sound of feet that no longer ran away. Sometimes Ethan still woke before dawn and found Mabel in the blue-gray light by the window, watching the city before it fully became itself. He would stand in the kitchen in his socks making coffee and say, "Morning," Mabel. And somewhere from above, or from the hall, or from the edge of the sofa, she would answer with one small sound. Not much, just enough. Because sometimes that is how trust arrives. Not all at once, not in a grand gesture, just in the quiet decision to come closer and stay. And sometimes the thing that makes a place feel like home is not that the silence disappears. It's that, at last, the silence is shared. Maybe that's why the gentlest connections often mean the most. They do not rush in and save us. They sit near us in the dark until the room feels less empty, and teach us that love in its softest form is often just patience that stayed. If this story stayed with you, I'd love to know what moment first made your cat feel truly close to you. And if you enjoy quiet, emotional stories like this, you can like the video and subscribe to stay for the next one.